In the spring of 2026, the Strait of Hormuz is no longer a trade route. It is a trap. 2,000 ships. 3,200 vessels of every size and every flag now sit immobilized in one of the most critical waterways on the planet. Their engines are still on. Their cargo is deteriorating. Their crews are stranded in open water, waiting inside a crisis no one can quickly solve. All of this is happening at a 33 kilometers choke point. This narrow passage once carried 20% of the world's oil every single day. Now that flow has stopped. Iran has followed through on the threat it spent years making. It has seized the pressure point of the global economy and held it shut. But the real shock comes after that, because the world did not break. It did not give in. It did not sit still hoping diplomacy would rescue it. Instead, 3 enormous projects, one through mountains, one across desert rail corridors, and one down the Arabian Peninsula by pipeline, are moving fast enough to change the map of global trade. And when that shift is complete, Iran may never be able to play this card the same way again. Today, we're taking you deep inside the 3 mega projects that are changing the map of the Middle East forever. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. Hit subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss a single update on this story, because this is moving fast and it is only getting bigger. Let's start with the crisis itself, because to understand why these projects matter, you need to understand exactly how deep this hole is. On March 2nd, 2026, Iran formally closed the Strait of Hormuz to non-Iranian shipping. This was not a threat. This was not a warning shot. This was the real thing. The move came in direct response to Operation Epic Fury, the coordinated U.S.-Israeli military campaign launched on February 28th, 2026. And it sent shockwaves through every commodity market, every shipping company, and every government on the planet. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day had been passing through the Strait before the conflict. Overnight, that flow stopped. Saudi Aramco's CEO Amin Nasser, speaking on the company's earnings call on March 10th, confirmed that exports from Ras Tanura, the kingdom's primary Gulf export terminal handling roughly 5.5 million barrels per day, had been effectively shut off. The company, he warned, only had adequate inventories to maintain flows, provided the war does not persist in the long term. Freight rates exploded. Oil prices surged above $100 a barrel within days. The International Maritime Organization reported thousands of vessels effectively immobilized in or around the Strait, with maritime AI company Windward identifying 27 very large crude carriers lined up at Yanbu alone, desperately waiting to load Saudi oil rerouted through the Red Sea. The Houthis in Yemen, meanwhile, had already demonstrated in previous years that the southern entrance to the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb, was well within their range. According to Arab News, Houthi attacks on shipping had targeted more than 170 vessels before a ceasefire brokered by Oman was reached in May 2025. That ceasefire has since shown cracks. In other words, the world was caught in a vice, a grip tightening from 2 directions at once. And yet, right at this moment of maximum pressure, something extraordinary is happening. The world is not waiting to be rescued. It is building its own escape routes. 3 of them, each one more audacious than the last. Let's begin with the project that has captured the imagination of engineers, strategists, and dreamers around the world: the Hajar Mountains Canal. The concept is simple to state and almost impossible to believe. Carve a waterway directly through some of the most rugged terrain on Earth, link the Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman without ever touching Iranian waters. Allow the world's largest supertankers to sail through a mountain, the Muzandam Peninsula, that jagged finger of land controlled by Oman that juts northward into the Strait, sits between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. In some places, the gap between the 2 bodies of water is just a few dozen miles. On a map, it looks almost effortless. Then you look at the terrain. The Hajar Mountains do not cooperate. According to multiple engineering assessments cited by Arab News and the Defense Horizon Journal, the range rises to 3,000 meters in places with limestone peaks that soar more than 6,500 feet from the coastline. The concept videos circulating online show a clean 32-kilometer corridor, 25 meters deep, 300 meters wide, with 3 massive lock systems balancing the sea level difference. The price tag mentioned somewhere between $100 billion and $300 billion, with the lower estimates considered wildly optimistic by most independent engineers. Here is the harder truth that the viral videos don't tell you. An analysis published by Arab News found that a canal bypassing the Strait would require not 3 lock systems, but potentially hundreds, between 240 and 400, depending on lift dimensions, with each individual lock structure comparable in scale to some of the world's largest dams. As engineers at the Defense Horizon Journal put it, the main barrier is not political will or money, it is the mountain itself. The Hajar Range is 100 kilometers wide. Crossing it with a canal capable of handling very large crude carriers would require moving, in the words of one technical assessment, more rock than all human construction projects in history combined. There is also a water problem. Unlike the Panama Canal, which sits in one of the wettest regions on Earth and uses a massive natural lake, the Hajar Range is arid desert at altitude. Every lock cycle would require pumping enormous volumes of seawater upward at tremendous energy cost. The fees charged to ships would have to be staggering just to break even. The conclusion of nearly every serious engineering review published in early 2026 is the same: the canal remains, for now, more dream than deliverable. As Arab News summarized plainly, all things considered, a canal bypassing the Strait of Hormuz is not a practical solution. A second petroleum or a new pipeline through the UAE would be built faster, cost less, and carry more oil per dollar spent. But here is what matters strategically. The idea is alive, the conversation has started. The Defense Horizon Journal proposes a more realistic version, a 116-kilometer cross-peninsula corridor connecting Shinus on the Gulf side to Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman side. Shorter, more manageable, and potentially capable of carrying 20 to 25 million barrels per day at full build-out. A project estimated at $70 to $100 billion and requiring 10 to 15 years of sustained commitment. That is not cheap. But compared to the trillions of dollars that a permanent Hormuz closure could destroy, it starts to look less like a luxury and more like the most important insurance policy in history. And while engineers debate the mountain canal, another project is not waiting for anyone's permission. It is already under construction. Make sure you're subscribed to World Brief Daily and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next chapter of this story. What we're about to walk through is one of the most consequential infrastructure decisions of the 21st century. And it's happening right now under almost no media coverage in the deserts of Iraq. It is called the Development Road, and it may be the most important trade corridor on Earth that most people have never heard of. Here are the basic facts. A 1,200-kilometer combined railway and highway network starting at Iraq's Grand Fa port on the Persian Gulf, running north through Basra, Baghdad, and Mosul, crossing into Turkey at the Ovakoy border crossing, connecting through Turkey's existing networks to Kapikale on the Bulgarian frontier, and from there into the European Union's customs zone. Total project cost was initially announced at $17 billion. With revised estimates now placing the full figure closer to $23.9 billion, according to Turkey Today. Expected economic boost, approximately $50 billion and over 60,000 jobs. And here's what makes this different from every other Middle Eastern mega project you've heard about and forgotten. This one has momentum. In April 2024, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited Baghdad, his first visit in 13 years, and signed a quadrilateral memorandum of understanding with Iraq, Qatar, and the UAE. The financing model has been agreed. The design is complete. On December 5th, 2025, Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani personally inaugurated the first 63 kilometers of asphalt stretching from the Grand Fa toward Khor al-Zubair In his remarks at the ceremony, Soudani described the project as embodying a vision to transition Iraq from a rent-based economy to one that actively supports agriculture, industry, and trade. The World Bank approved a $930 million railway modernization project for Iraq in June 2025, with World Bank Middle East Director Jean-Christophe Carré stating that enhanced trade and connectivity can stimulate growth, create jobs, and reduce oil dependency. The strategic logic of the development road in the context of the Hormuz crisis is almost brutally simple. Ships can be mined. Missiles can sink tankers. Drones can swarm a strait. But a railway running under the desert, a highway flanked by security infrastructure, those are a different kind of asset entirely. According to the International Road Transport Union, an inland shipment from Poland to the UAE via Turkey and Iraq using Iraq's new TIR corridors was completed in just 12 days. The comparable multimodal route via the Red Sea and Suez Canal takes 21 days. The development road, when fully operational, aims to move 5 million containers and 33 million tons of bulk cargo per year through this overland corridor. For the Gulf, this means oil, gas, and container cargo leaving the Persian Gulf need not enter the Strait of Hormuz at all. They transfer at thaw onto trains, and they are in Europe in under 2 weeks. Turkey rises as the indispensable land bridge between East and West. Iraq reclaims the geopolitical role that decades of war destroyed. Qatar and the UAE cement their positions as the Gulf's strategic investors. And Europe gains a direct overland artery to the world's largest energy reserves that no Iranian missile can reach. There are complications. Iran's proxies inside Iraq, the Popular Mobilization Forces, have already attacked Turkish bases in the country. The Kurdish question remains unresolved. Northern Iraq's political geography is fractured between the Kurdistan Democratic Party and the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, and the exclusion of the Kurdistan regional government from the project's core structure has drawn criticism. As the Middle East Council on Global Affairs noted, the development road's success requires Iraq to get its political house in order, and Iraq's politics have rarely cooperated with strategic ambition. But the arrow has left the bow. The first road is paved. The World Bank is invested. Turkey has begun its domestic preparations. And the four-country financing consortium has its signal. Now, let's pivot to the third project. And this one carries the highest political voltage of all, because this is not just an infrastructure proposal, it is a geopolitical realignment wrapped in steel pipe. And at its center stands one of the most polarizing leaders in the world. Speaking at a press conference with foreign media in Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu laid out what he called the only sustainable long-term answer to the Hormuz crisis. Instead of passing through choke points like the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb, Netanyahu said, "We can build pipelines westward through the Arabian Peninsula to Israel's Mediterranean ports and effectively eliminate these choke points." He elaborated in an interview with Newsmax, long-term solutions include rerouting energy pipelines westward across Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea and Mediterranean, bypassing Iran's geographic choke point. The plan, as reported by the Financial Times and confirmed by multiple regional outlets, involves a pipeline network originating in the vast oil fields of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The oil would cross the desert, entering Israel via Jordan or directly across Saudi territory, and arrive at the Mediterranean ports of Haifa and Ashdod. From there, it flows directly into European energy markets. No Hormuz. No Bab el-Mandeb. No Suez Canal. The entire maritime choke point architecture simply becomes irrelevant. Israel's positioning here is deliberate and calculated. For years, Israeli officials have promoted the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, the IMEC project, first unveiled at the G20 summit in New Delhi in September 2023. That initiative already maps out an integrated network of ports, rail lines, and pipelines connecting India to Europe through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. In that framework, the Haifa route was always the western terminus. The war in Iran has not created this idea. It has turbocharged it. But there is a wall, and its name is Saudi Arabia. As the Financial Times reported, Saudi Arabia has so far stayed on the sidelines. Despite what one senior Gulf energy executive called the genius master stroke of the petroleum, the East-West pipeline that is currently serving as the kingdom's lifeline, Riyadh has not publicly embraced a pipeline route through Israel. The stalled normalization process between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which suffered a severe setback after October 2023, continues to cast a long shadow. As Gidon Bromberg, CEO of EcoPeace Middle East, told All Israel News, Saudi officials now clearly understand that moving goods westward is a vital interest, but they have options, either through Haifa, north, through Syria, or other routes. That hesitation may be slowly breaking down. As reported by WET News, about 20,000 sailors aboard roughly 3,200 vessels are currently stranded in the waters around the Strait of Hormuz. The economic pain is not abstract. It is measured in the daily losses of oil revenues, rising operational costs, and the growing exposure of every Gulf state to the unpredictable decisions of Tehran. According to Lebanese construction firm Cat Group CEO Christopher Bushell, his company has already received inquiries about various pipelines, a discreet but significant signal that serious money is starting to move. Yet Netanyahu's plan is not without its own complications. If Saudi Arabia formally agrees to route its exports through Israel, it would represent a historic, perhaps seismic political shift in the region. And while the economic incentive is overwhelming, political will in the Gulf does not move in straight lines. As Israeli officials acknowledge, the plan that could reshape the energy map of the 21st century ultimately requires a partner that has not yet said yes. Now, while these three mega projects take shape on the drawing board and in the desert, there is a fourth dimension to this story that cannot be ignored. The infrastructure that is actually working right now today. It is called the petroleum, and it may be the most underrated piece of energy infrastructure on the planet. Built in 1981 during the Iran-Iraq War, the last time the Strait of Hormuz faced a serious disruption, the East-West pipeline runs 1,200 kilometers across the full width of Saudi Arabia, from the Abqaiq processing complex in the eastern province to the Red Sea port of Yanbu. It was designed to give the kingdom breathing room during a crisis. No one designed it to carry Saudi Arabia's full export load indefinitely. But that is exactly what it is doing right now. On March 10th, 2026, Aramco CEO Amin Nasser confirmed on the company's earnings call that the pipeline was approaching its full capacity of 7 million barrels per day. It hit that milestone on March 11th. According to data published by Fortune magazine and Pipeline Technology Journal, crude exports via Yanbu have now reached approximately 5 million barrels per day, supplemented by an additional 700,000 to 900,000 barrels per day of refined petroleum products. Windward Maritime AI reported a 330% surge in Yanbu exports compared to pre-war levels, with 27 very large crude carriers lined up at the terminal. As Al Arabiya noted, this is why oil prices, while elevated and painful, have not yet reached the catastrophic levels of a full supply shock. But here is the critical number. Before the war, the Strait of Hormuz was carrying approximately 15 to 20 million barrels per day of petroleum. The petroleum, even at maximum capacity, can replace at best a fraction of that, as the International Energy Agency assessed. Available bypass capacity across all alternative routes stands between 3.5 and 5.5 million barrels per day. That leaves a gap of more than 10 million barrels per day. Structurally unbridgeable by existing infrastructure and growing more costly every day. The blockade holds. There is another trap inside the solution. As energy consultant Ellen Wald told Middle East Eye, maximizing the pipeline for crude means abandoning its previous role, carrying natural gas, liquids, and products. If the East-West pipeline is converted to carry all of Aramco's crude oil exports to Yanbu, then it can't also carry natural gas or products. The result is what chief analyst Arne Lohmann Rasmussen of Global Risk Management called a distillate crisis, a jet fuel and diesel emergency, especially acute in Europe. Roughly 30% of Europe's diesel imports and half its jet fuel imports came from the Middle East entering 2026. No pipeline carries those. They can only leave the Gulf by sea. And the sea, right now, is exactly what Iran controls. The UAE, for its part, has not been idle. The Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, running 380 kilometers from the Habshan oil field in the interior to the port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, allows the Emirates to export roughly 1.5 million barrels per day entirely outside the Strait. This pipeline was built precisely for this contingency. When combined with Saudi Arabia's petroleum exports, the total alternative bypass capacity reaches approximately 6 to 9 million barrels per day. A meaningful buffer, but still far short of what the world needs. Here is where the danger lives inside the solution. Redirecting Saudi exports to the Red Sea does not eliminate vulnerability, it relocates it. As Greg Priddy, a senior fellow at the Center for the National Interest, told Middle East Eye, all of that infrastructure is still exposed to drones, and the oil leaving Yanbu going to Asia has to pass through the Bab el-Mandeb. The Houthis remain armed. The southern gate of the Red Sea remains contested. Saudi Arabia has, in the words of one analyst, solved one choke point problem by creating exposure to another. This is the geometry of the crisis as it stands today. A partial solution working hard to prevent complete collapse. A global economy running on emergency infrastructure built 40 years ago for a shorter war. And 3 audacious mega projects racing against time and politics to build something permanent. Which brings us to the question that Iran's strategists must be asking right now. Will Tehran simply watch as the world engineers its way around the blockade? The answer almost certainly is no. Iran's track record with asymmetric strategy is long and sophisticated. In 2019, Houthi drones struck the Abqaiq facility, the heart of Saudi Arabia's oil processing capability, in an attack that temporarily took 5% of global supply offline in a single night. In the years since, kamikaze drones have become cheaper, faster, and more accurate. The development road's railway lines across Iraq pass through territory where Iran-aligned militias have shown both capability and willingness to strike. The Israel pipeline proposal, if it ever advances, will generate an Iranian response that goes well beyond diplomatic protest. As the original transcript makes clear, Iran, rather than engaging in direct warfare, may attempt to sever these new land-based arteries using asymmetric methods, just as it has done at sea. Long-range drones capable of crossing borders, cyber attacks on pipeline management systems, sabotage operations carried out through proxy forces, these are not hypothetical threats. They are the documented toolkit of a regime that has spent 4 decades turning geography into leverage. And yet, despite all of this, despite the risks, the mountains, the politics, and the proxies, the machinery of global capital has already made its decision. The signatures on the development road agreement belong to Turkey, Iraq, Qatar, and the UAE. The financing conversations behind the Haifa pipeline involve the financial centers of 3 continents. The engineering firms already receiving pipeline inquiries are not waiting for peace to break out. They are building contingencies inside the conflict. As Arab News observed, constructing a second petroline would be faster, cheaper, and more strategically sound than almost any other option. The conversations are happening now. The budgets are being approved. History has a pattern here. Every time a power has attempted to permanently control a choke point, the world has eventually built around it. Gibraltar, Suez, Malacca. Each one seemed at its moment of maximum leverage, like an unbreakable lock. Each one became less relevant as capital, engineering, and political will combined to create alternatives. The Strait of Hormuz is not different in kind. It is different only in the timing. Consider what has already shifted in just the past few weeks. Saudi Arabia's petroline, a 4-0 year-old emergency asset, is now carrying the weight of global energy stability on its steel backbone. According to Fortune magazine, crude exports via Yanbu have reached 5 million barrels per day. The East-West pipeline hit its full 7 million barrel capacity on March 11th, 2026, a number that had never been tested at sustained flows in its entire history. That is an engineering achievement under wartime conditions, and it is only the beginning. Iraq's development road has 63 kilometers of asphalt already laid. The Grand Fa port is nearing completion, designed to become the largest container port in the Middle East. An entire telecommunications network contracted with Turkish state firm Turk Telecom is being woven into the corridor to serve international logistics companies. The World Bank is funding railway modernization. The IRU has officially welcomed Iraq into the Global TIR Transport Convention. These are not gestures. These are the foundations of a system. And Israel's pipeline proposal, however politically complicated, has placed on the table an energy corridor concept that 3 years ago would have been laughed out of any diplomatic gathering. The fact that Gulf states are now openly studying it, according to the Financial Times, tells you everything you need to know about how radically the calculations have shifted. The world is not waiting for Iran to blink. It is building the infrastructure that will make the blink irrelevant. There is one more dimension to this story that does not get enough attention. It is the human dimension. Those 20,000 sailors stranded in the Strait. The aviation fuel is running short in European airports. The diesel trucks are sitting idle at distribution centers from Rotterdam to Yokohama. The farmers who can't price their inputs because fertilizer costs have gone parabolic. The manufacturers who have stopped taking orders because they don't know when their components will arrive. The second is the development road. It is the most advanced and the most immediately consequential. Steel and asphalt are already on the ground in southern Iraq. Financing is agreed. International institutions are invested. When fully operational, this corridor will give the Gulf a land-based route to Europe that no navy can blockade and no mine can close. Iraq, for the first time in decades, will be something other than a battlefield. It will be a bridge. The third, the Israel pipeline corridor, is the most politically charged and potentially the most transformative. If it happens, if Saudi Arabia says yes, if the normalization process finds its footing amid the chaos of this war, the pipeline that Netanyahu has proposed would not just bypass Hormuz, it would redraw the entire energy architecture of the Middle East. It would make Israel the indispensable transit hub between the Gulf and Europe. And it would render the Iranian blockade strategy, the one being played so forcefully right now, permanently obsolete. That is what is at stake. Not just the reopening of a strait, not just the restoration of pre-war oil flows, but the permanent restructuring of how energy moves across the planet. The construction of a world where no single country can hold 20 million barrels of daily oil flow hostage by controlling 33 kilometers of water. Iran's great geographic trump card, the one it has held for decades, the one that made every U.S. president's Middle East policy orbit around the threat of a Hormuz closure, is being systematically dismantled, not by bombs, not by sanctions alone, but by engineers, financiers, and politicians who have finally decided that the cost of dependence is higher than the cost of building alternatives. Water finds its own path. So does global trade. The ships stranded in the Strait of Hormuz right now are the last generation of vessels that will ever be fully dependent on that narrow passage. Their successors will have choices. And choices in global trade are the one thing that no blockade can take away. That is the story we are watching unfold in real time. And this is World Brief Daily, where we stay on top of it every day, every development, every shift. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Hit the bell because the next chapter of this story is already being written and you don't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.